I want to begin, my dear, with my hands shaking. Because that is how this story truly starts, not 30 years ago, but on an ordinary wet Tuesday last spring, when I was 81 years old, kneeling on the floor of my late husband's study with a screwdriver in my hand, and I lifted the false bottom out of the bottom drawer of his desk, and I found a letter. A letter in his handwriting, sealed with one word written on the front in his careful hand, Edith. My name. And my hands began to shake, my dear, before I had even opened it, because some part of me, some old, buried, knowing part of me, understood that whatever was inside that envelope was going to change everything I thought I knew about the last 30 years of my life. And it did. Oh, it did. But to understand why, you must let me take you back to a Christmas long ago, and to 2 brothers, and to £4,000 that vanished into thin air. My name is Edith, and I am 82 years old now, and I live in a stone cottage in a small village in the Cotswolds, the kind of village that the tourists stop to photograph in the summer. I have lived here for 50 years, and for most of those years it was a happy house, full of noise and family and the particular chaos of 2 growing boys. My husband, Gerald, and I had 2 sons. Robert, the elder, was the steady one, careful, responsible, the kind of boy who saved his pocket money in a tin and lectured his brother about wasting his. And Daniel, the younger, was the bright one, the funny one, the one who could charm the birds out of the trees but who never could hold on to money for love nor sense. He was always borrowing, always a bit short, always with some scheme or other. He was, I'll admit, the more difficult of the 2. But he was also, God help me, the one whose laugh could fill a whole room. And I loved them both, of course, the way you do, differently but completely. I want to give you one memory of Daniel, my dear, before I tell you what we did to him, because it shames me that we forgot it. When the boys were small, perhaps 9 and 11, Robert saved up for the best part of a year for a bicycle, counted every penny in his tin, the careful boy. And the week before he had enough, the tin was found short, and Robert was beside himself, certain Daniel had taken it, because Daniel was always the one short of money even at 9 years old. There was a great to-do, and then it came out that Daniel had taken the money, yes, but he'd taken it to replace Robert's pet rabbit, which had died while Robert was away at a school camp, and which Daniel had buried and then bought an identical one from the pet shop 2 villages over so that his big brother would never have to come home to a dead rabbit. He took the blame for being a thief rather than tell Robert the rabbit had died on his watch. That was Daniel, my dear. That was the boy underneath the reputation, a boy who would rather be thought a thief than let his brother grieve. We had that memory, we had 30 years to remember it, and on the morning the envelope vanished, not one of us thought of the rabbit. That is how the easy lie works. It does not just ignore the evidence in front of you. It reaches back and rewrites all the evidence behind you too. Now I must tell you about the money and the Christmas it disappeared, because everything turns on it. It was the Christmas of 1993. Gerald had sold a piece of land that year, a field that had belonged to his father that we'd finally let go of, and he'd been paid a portion of it in cash, which was how things were sometimes done in those days, my dear, particularly with land and particularly in the country. £4,000 in £20 notes in a thick brown envelope. It was a great deal of money then, more than I'd ever seen in one place. Gerald kept it in the drawer of his desk in the study, waiting to pay it into the bank after the Christmas holidays when the banks reopened. He told the boys it was there. That was his mistake, perhaps, or perhaps not. Perhaps it changed nothing. He showed them, in fact, on Christmas Eve, rather proudly, the proceeds of his father's field. And on the morning of the 27th of December, the envelope was gone. I shall never forget the cold that came over that house. Gerald tore the study apart looking for it. We searched everywhere, every drawer, under every cushion. It was simply gone. And then, my dear, came the terrible business of who. Because the house had been full over Christmas, the boys were both home, Robert with his sensible young fiancée, Daniel on his own as usual, but no one else had been in the study. No stranger, no burglar, nothing was broken, no window forced. The money had been taken by someone in the family. And I watched my husband's face as that realization settled on him, and I watched his eyes move, almost against his will, to Daniel. Because of course they did. Because Daniel was the one who was always short. Daniel was the one with the debts and the schemes. Daniel had been heard, only that autumn, telling a friend on the telephone that he was in a bit of bother and needed to sort something out before it got nasty. Daniel was the obvious one, the easy one, the one whose whole character seemed to point at him like an accusing finger. And when Gerald asked him, straight out in the study with the whole family standing there, Daniel, did you take it? Daniel went white and then he went red and he said no. No, Dad, I swear I didn't touch it. But his voice shook when he said it. And a shaking voice, my dear, in a boy with a reputation, was all the proof anyone needed. We did not call the police. Gerald wouldn't hear of it, the shame of it, a son in a village like ours. But what happened instead was, in its way, worse than any court. Daniel was tried and convicted at our own kitchen table by his own family on the evidence of his reputation and a shaking voice. Robert was certain of his brother's guilt, utterly, coldly certain, and said so, and never wavered. Gerald believed it too, though it broke something in him to believe it. And this is the part I must confess to you, my dear, because I will not tell this story and leave myself out of the blame, I believed it as well, not entirely. There was a small voice in me that said, not my Daniel, surely. But I let the small voice be drowned out because the loud voice, the easy voice, the voice that fit everything I already thought I knew about my difficult younger son, said of course he did. Who else? And I said nothing in his defense. I stood in that study, his own mother, and I said nothing. Daniel left the house that day, my dear. He looked around at all of us, at his father, at his brother, at me, his mother, saying nothing, and something in his face simply closed like a door, and he said very quietly, if this is what you all think of me, then there's nothing here for me. And he packed a bag and he went, and he did not come back for 30 years. Let me tell you what 30 years of believing a lie costs a family, my dear, because the bill is longer than you would imagine. Daniel built a life somewhere else, far away, and he built it without us. He married a woman we never met. He had 2 children, my grandchildren, whom I have never held, never read a story to, never watched open a present. He sent no cards. He answered no letters in the early years when I still wrote them. He simply erased us the way we had in that study erased our faith in him. And who could blame him? If your own mother believes you a thief, what is there to come home to? In the first few years. My dear, I did try. I want you to know that, though it doesn't excuse what came before. I wrote to him not to ask his forgiveness, for in those days I still half believed him guilty, God forgive me, but to say the door was open. The letters came back unopened at first, and then they simply went into silence, and I told myself he was the stubborn one, the difficult one, too proud to mend things. I see now what I could not see then, that a man does not unopen the letters of a mother he believes still thinks him a thief. He was not being stubborn. He was protecting himself from us, the way you'd pull your hand back from a fire. And there was one moment, I have thought of it 1,000 times since, when the telephone rang late one night, perhaps 8 years after he left, and there was no one there, just the sound of someone breathing and traffic far off, a phone box somewhere. And I said, Daniel, is that you, love, Daniel? And the line went dead. I will never know for certain that it was him. But a mother knows the breathing of her own child, my dear, even down a telephone line, even after 8 years. And I believe to this day that my son stood in a phone box on a cold night somewhere, wanting to come home, and that all he needed was for me to say the one thing I could not say because I did not yet know it was true. It wasn't you, and we know it wasn't you, come home. And I didn't say it. And the line went dead, and he never rang again. The years went by. Robert married and gave us grandchildren we did know, and there was happiness in that, real happiness, but it always had a hole in the middle of it, a Daniel-shaped hole, an empty place at every Christmas table that no one quite mentioned. Gerald grew old and quiet, and I noticed over the years that he never spoke of Daniel at all, not angrily, not sadly, not at all. He simply went silent at the name and changed the subject, and I took it for the grief of a father betrayed. I know now it was something else entirely. It was the silence of a man with a stone on his conscience, growing heavier every year. Gerald passed away 2 springs ago, my dear, after 56 years of marriage. And in the months after, as you must when you lose a husband, I set about the long, sad business of going through his things. His study was the last room I tackled because it was the most his, the room where he'd kept the accounts and read his papers, and once, long ago, kept a brown envelope of money that tore our family in 2. And it was in that study, clearing out his old desk to give to my grandson, that I found the drawer that wouldn't come all the way out. It stuck as though it were shorter than the others. And being a practical woman, I fetched a screwdriver to see what was jamming it. And I found that the bottom of the drawer was false, a thin panel of wood, fitted by a careful joinering hand, hiding a shallow space beneath. And in that space lay a single sealed envelope, yellowed with age, with my name on the front, Edith. I sat down on the floor of that study, my dear, and I opened it and I read it, and the world I had lived in for 30 years quietly came apart in my hands. I will tell you what it said. I have read it so many times now that I know it by heart. My dear Edith, it began. If you are reading this, then I am gone, and I am a coward to the very end. For I could not say this to your face while I lived. The money was not Daniel, the money was me. There was a debt, Edith, a foolish debt, a loan I had guaranteed for a friend who let me down, and the men who held it were not gentle men, and I was too proud and too frightened to tell you we stood to lose the house. So I took the 4,000 from the drawer to pay them off, and then, God forgive me, when the family turned on Daniel, I let them. I told myself I would put it right. I told myself I would confess when the dust settled, but the longer I left it, the more impossible it became, and the more it would have cost me to admit, until I had buried it so deep that confessing would have cost me everything: your love, Robert's respect, the whole picture of myself as a decent man. So I let our boy carry my crime out of that door, and I let him stay gone because his being gone meant the truth could stay gone too. I have thought of him every single day. The drawer I hid this in I built with my own hands, which is the cruelest joke of all, for I have the skill to build a false bottom to hide a letter, but not the courage to speak 12 words. It was me, not Daniel, and I have wronged my son. Find him, Edith, tell him I was a coward in life. Let me be honest, at least in death. Your loving and unworthy husband, Gerald. Now I want you to imagine how I felt, my dear, sitting on that floor, 81 years old, holding the proof in my husband's own hand that the son we had cast out as a thief had been innocent all along, innocent and wronged and exiled by the very people who should have stood between him and the whole world. 30 years, 30 Christmases, 2 grandchildren I had never met. A boy whose laugh could fill a room, who had walked out of that door white-faced and telling the truth, while his whole family called him a liar with their silence. And the grief I felt was not simple grief. It was rage and it was shame, and it was a love so suddenly and violently returned to its rightful place that I thought my old heart would not stand it. I was angry at Gerald. Oh, I was angry at Gerald, my dead husband, in a way I have had to make a long and difficult peace with. But mostly, my dear, mostly I was angry at myself. Because Gerald's was a sin of cowardice, a sin of doing. But mine was a sin of the heart. I had believed the worst of my own child because it was easier than believing the worst of my husband, or the worst of my own family, or the worst of the comfortable picture I had of all our lives. I had chosen the easy lie over the hard look, and my boy had paid for it with 30 years. I did not sleep that night, my dear. I sat up in the chair by the cold fire with the letter in my lap, and I had it out with Gerald, with his photograph on the mantelpiece, with his memory. With the empty side of the bed I went and looked at and could not lie down in. 56 years I had been married to that man. I had thought I knew the whole of him. And here was a room in him I had never been allowed into, a locked room where he had kept his cowardice and his guilt and his daily private grief for our exiled son, all those years, behind the same easy smile he gave me over breakfast. I felt I had been married to a stranger, and yet, and this is the hard, true thing, my dear, I had loved that stranger, and he had loved me, and the very same man who let his son take the blame was the man who held my hand through 2 miscarriages and never once raised his voice to me in 56 years. People are not one thing. That is what the letter taught me before I ever found Daniel. The man you love and the man who fails you most terribly can be, and very often are, the same man, sleeping beside you, carrying a drawer with a false bottom in his heart. I wept for Gerald that night even as I raged at him, because he had been too frightened of losing his place in our hearts to do the one thing that might have deserved it, and that is a kind of poverty, my dear, the poverty of a man who cannot bear to be seen as less than perfect, and it cost him his son and his peace, and I think in the end a good part of his soul. I knew, sitting on that floor, that I had to find him. Whatever it took, however late. It was not easy, my dear, finding a man who has spent 30 years making sure he cannot be found. But my grandson, Robert's boy, who is clever with computers as the young all are, helped me, and between us over some weeks we traced Daniel to a town in the northwest where he ran, of all things, a small woodworking business. His father's gift in his hands after all, you see, even after everything. I did not telephone. I did not write. I had written before, all those years ago, and it had come to nothing. And besides, this was not a thing for a letter, except the one letter that mattered. I asked Robert to drive me. And Robert, who had been the most certain of all of us 30 years ago, and who had read his father's confession with a face like a man turned to stone, Robert drove his old mother 4 hours north, and neither of us said very much, because there was too much to say and no words yet found to say it. We knocked on the door of a modest house with a tidy garden, and a man answered, grey now, lined, 60 years old, but with the same eyes, my dear, the same eyes, and he looked at the 2 of us standing on his step, his mother and his brother 30 years older, and his face did exactly what it had done in the study all those years before. It began to close, like a door. Whatever you've come to say, he began, and his voice was tired, so tired I don't, and I held up the letter. My husband's letter. And I said the only thing that mattered, the 12 words Gerald never found the courage to say. It was your father, Daniel, not you. We were wrong, I am so sorry. And my son, my 60-year-old son, this grey stranger on a doorstep, read his father's confession standing right there in the doorway, and I watched 30 years of being a thief in the eyes of everyone he'd loved simply lift off his shoulders. And he put his hand against the doorframe to steady himself, and he wept. He wept the way a man weeps when something he gave up grieving for is suddenly, impossibly given back. And then Robert, cold, certain Robert, stepped forward and put his arms around the brother he had condemned, and said, "I'm sorry, Dan. God forgive me. I'm so sorry," and the two of them held each other on that doorstep, two grey-haired men, sobbing like boys, and I stood and watched my family begin, after 30 years, to knit itself back together over a letter my husband had been too frightened to send. It has not all been mended, my dear. I will be honest with you, because false comfort helps no one. 30 years cannot be given back. The grandchildren I never held are grown now, with lives and faces shaped by a grandmother's 30-year absence, and we are strangers learning slowly, gently to be something more. Daniel and I are rebuilding, but you do not rebuild 30 years in an afternoon. And there are wounds in him, I put there, that may never fully close. But we have time now, not much at my age, but some, and we are using it. There was one evening a few months after the doorstep, when Daniel came down to the Cotswolds on his own, just to talk, and we sat up late in the kitchen, the two of us, the way we never had when he was a boy, because there had always been too much noise and too many people. And he told me quietly what those 30 years had really been, not the bare facts, but the inside of them. How for the first 10 years he had been so angry he could not say our name. How somewhere in the middle of it the anger had worn down into something worse, a kind of settled belief that he simply was the sort of person a family casts out, that there must be something wrong with him for it to have happened at all. "That's the bit I can't get back, Mum," he said. "Not the years. The years are gone, fine. It's that for 30 years I half believed you were right to think it of me. I started watching myself for the thief you all saw. That's what it does. You become the thing they decided you were, just a little, just to make sense of it. And I had no answer for that, my dear, none at all, except to take his hand across the table and say I was sorry, the way I should have said it in 1993, and to mean it with every bit of an old woman's broken heart. He came to the Cotswolds last Christmas, my dear, for the first time in 30 years, and he sat at the table, in the place that had been empty for 3 decades, and his children and Robert's children sat together, cousins meeting almost for the first time, and there was noise in that house again, and laughter, his laughter, the laughter that could fill a room. And I sat at the head of the table, and I looked at the empty chair that was empty no longer, and I thought of Gerald, and I did not know whether to thank him for the letter or to never forgive him for needing to write it. I have decided in the end to do both. That is what a long marriage teaches you, my dear. How to hold love and anger in the same 2 hands and not let go of either. Now here is the lesson, and I have earned the right to tell it the hard way, so I will. We are so quick, my dear, so terribly quick to believe the worst of people, and quickest of all to believe it of the ones who have disappointed us before. Daniel had a reputation, and so when something went wrong, the reputation answered for him before he could open his mouth. We did not weigh the evidence. We weighed the boy against the story we already had about the boy, and we found him guilty of being who we'd decided he was. And that, my dear, is the most dangerous thing a family can do, to let a person's past, or their difficult nature, or their reputation, stand in for the truth. The difficult ones, the ones who are always a bit of bother, the ones who don't fit, they are the ones we must be most careful to actually look at, because they are the ones the easy lie fits most snugly. And there is a second lesson, my dear, and it is for the Geralds of this world, the cowards, and I say that with love, for there is a coward in most of us. A small wrong left unconfessed does not stay small. It grows. It puts down roots. It builds false bottoms into desk drawers and silences at the mention of a name. The longer you leave the truth unspoken, the more it costs to speak it, until one day the price of honesty seems higher than a life, and you let an innocent boy carry your sin out of the door rather than pay it. Confess the small thing while it is still small, my dear, while it costs you only your pride and not your son. 12 words, spoken in 1993, would have saved 30 years. 12 words, Gerald had them in him the whole time. He just kept them in a drawer. And the terrible arithmetic of it, my dear, is that the truth never got cheaper for the waiting. It only ever got dearer. A thing you could have set right for the price of an awkward afternoon, left long enough, will one day cost you everything you own and a few things you didn't know you had. So if there is someone you have judged, my dear, someone you cast out or quietly decided about, on evidence you never truly tested, go and look again. Look properly, the way you'd want to be looked at. And if there is a truth you've been keeping in a drawer because it's grown too frightening to speak, take it out today while there is still time, while there is still someone to say it to. Do not make your family find it under a false bottom when you are gone. Do not leave your love letters and your confessions for the screwdriver. Say them now with your living voice to their living face. Thank you for sitting with me, my dear. Hold the difficult ones a little closer tonight. Good night and God bless.